video, I just want to give you guys a quick guide on how to start solo in Season 8. Basically, where and with what starter items. I want to continue and play and test the new patch and everything that comes with it before I begin making any full-on tier lists or complete build guides. But since I have played a total of about 30 hours on this patch now between the past few days and, of course, on PTS, we can at least begin at the beginning, which is the start. So solo will now be starting the game with their jungler at the speed buff. You will clear the speed with your jungler, then both of the back camps on the way to blue, then take blue and walk into lane to start the laning phase from there. Since the mid laner no longer starts with the jungler, because he starts the red with his ADC, this start helps your jungler clear all those camps very quickly, gets you extra XP that you wouldn't have, and brings no real disadvantage to your lane, because the minions are a lot more delayed now at meeting in the middle of the map. In fact, this start allows you to hit level 3 on the second wave, which is insane for kill potential, especially if the other solo didn't start the same way. They'll only be level 2 on that second wave. There are other possible starts, but they are very niche for the most part, and honestly just aren't as good as this one. So I would say, for the most part, right now, try this start out and you'll probably see a lot of success. Alright guys, and now moving on, we're just going to start talking about the starter items and the builds basically at the beginning of the game. I know you guys are probably overwhelmed right now. There's a lot of options, a lot of variety now in the solo lane. But I'm going to try and make it pretty simple for you guys and break it down real easy so that you know what to do in basically every single one of your games. Something I will say is that a lot of the gameplays that I'm going to be uploading, you're going to be able to learn a lot from, just because that's where I'm going to be trying stuff out, testing stuff, and figuring out, what's set in stone for each god. So be sure to be watching my gameplays that I'm going to be uploading over the next few days. You're going to learn a lot from that if you're interested. But other than that, I'm just going to show you basically how to build every character at the beginning of the game. We're going to start out with the warriors and the assassins, and then go over to the guardians. The mages and stuff like that, we haven't really figured out too much, but usually, they're not too viable in solo for the most part. So, for warriors and assassins and even guardians, you can pretty much never go wrong with starting Warriors Axe right now. It's basically the equivalent of Warriors Blessing from last year or last season. It's basically the exact same thing, just a little bit different because it doesn't have true damage on it, but you still get the passive that lets you steal health from the opponent every 10 seconds, and also it still gives you that protection early on. It also has a flat damage reduction on it, which is very, very good early game. It allows you to tank minions for a while. That means you can take them outside the tower line. It means you can sit there in the wave and take them as you fight the enemy solo. It's just a very good flat damage reduction. Has always been very powerful because it's a flat damage reduction for every damage source that hits you. So that's archer shots, that's tower shots, that's auto attacks, that's minion damage from the jungle camps, that's ability based damage. Everything is being reduced individually based on the number, right? So that's pretty crazy. And another reason that this item is just a go-to right now, it's always pretty much good, is because the upgrade, Sundering Axe, later on in the game is just so powerful. It gives you 30 of each prot, 250 health, which is a really good defense item for 2,100 gold, plus 5 damage flat reduction. Like I just said, very, very good stat to have a flat damage reduction. But then also the passive basically gives you a Sunder. It gives you every 7 seconds you can take 10% of somebody's current health away. Just a quick little Soul Reaver for a tank. It's just really, really nice in that late game. It actually allows you to be very tanky while still doing a lot of damage in the late game. So if you're in doubt, when in doubt, maybe you're in a bad matchup where you feel like you're going to get bullied, or maybe you just don't really know what to do right now, on your characters, you can always just build Warrior's Axe, go a Chalice of Healing, go a few extra pots, whether that's health pots if you just want to survive until level 5, or maybe you can go multi-pots instead of health pots because you want to try and fight in the wave the first few levels, or maybe you're playing a little bit of a mana-hungry god because this starter item does not give you any mana, so that's something to keep in mind. Then, that's an option. This start, pretty standard. Like I said, you can't really go wrong with it, so if you're not even a solo laner and you just get stuck in solo and don't really know what to build and don't really want to figure it out that hard, this is what you're going to start. And then, of course, for your relic, it depends on your god, but most of the time it's going to be Blink, beads, perhaps. People are buying TP a little bit more right now, but I do not recommend it. I don't think you need to go that, and I think it's going to make your team fights just a little bit too weak for it to really be worth it. So I'd rather go something like Blink, beads. You can honestly go Horrific for some kill potential in lane. There's a lot of variety now when it comes to the relic, but for the most part, what we're worried about is the starter item. So for now, this is a pretty standard go-to. Now, the next things that we have to worry about for our warriors and our assassins are the 3 damage items, basically, which are Bluestone, Death Toll, and, of course, everyone's bane of their existence, Mannequin Scepter. Now, there's other items that we're going to talk about when it comes to the Guardians, like Tainted Steel, Vampiric Shroud, and stuff like that. But these are the 3 other go-tos that are pretty important right now, and we'll talk about another 4th option. I know there's so many options, but trust me, it's really not that big of a deal. We can make it really simple. So, Bluestone and Death Toll. Death Toll is basically pretty useless right now, okay? And the reason for that is it's supposed to be for auto attackers, when in reality, Mannequin Scepter is just a better option for auto attackers. Now, Death Toll gives you a little bit of sustain, right? It gives you 10 physical power, 75 health, and it gives you the sustain on the auto attacks, right? Every time you hit an auto attack, you get a little bit of health and mana back. But the problem is Mannequin Scepter also is good for auto attackers because it won't let me actually show you what it does for some reason. I'll have to click it again. So right here, it's up at the top. It does 10 basic attack damage, so it makes your auto attacks hit harder. It gives you tankiness, which is really good in the early game, 15 physical protection, and it also gives you 3 flat damage reduction. Like I said before, that's an insane stat to have in the early game. So basically, even though Death Toll gives you sustain, why would you want to sustain more if you're just tankier to begin with and never take that damage? You know what I mean? And not only that, that's not what broke the camel's back. You know, it's not the straw that broke the camel's back. The passive is what breaks the camel's back with Mannequin Scepter. It gives you damage on your auto attacks, a dot, basically like a bluestone, but on your auto attacks. So you're hitting everything harder and you're doing more damage because of the dot plus the extra basic attack damage. But then also, to add on to that, it gives you extra damage to jungle monsters. It takes 3 times the amount of damage when you're hitting a jungle monster with the Mannequin Scepter passive. So absolutely insane. It allows you to one-shot buffs early game and mid-game. It just allows you to hyper farm. It's very good in lane because it allows you to tank minions and hit the enemy solo and not take any damage. And it's just much better for auto attackers. So if you're playing an auto attack character like Bellona, Erlang, Osiris, or anything like that, look at mannequins. That's what you're probably going to be going most of the time. That or Warrior's Axe. So these are probably the first two, like the go-to options, Mannequin and Warrior's Axe. Death Toll pretty much never bought. Not right now, at least on this patch, not going to be good enough when you compare it to something like Mannequins. And then Bluestone is a little bit in between. It's definitely the third option. It's not nearly as good as Mannequin or Warrior's Axe, but it's a very good item on specific characters. Like, for example, Wukong is very good with Bluestone. It's an option that you have on both Arthur and Cuckoo if you want to try and dominate the early game and get some early like snowball potential with some kill potential and some clear potential on the enemy solo plus the jungle camps. And all Bluestone is it gives you physical power, HP 5, and MP 5, but then the passive, every ability that you hit, you apply a 25 damage dot on them, right? So it just basically adds dots to your abilities, and it, over the course of a game, it adds a lot of damage. So it is a nice little item. The only problem it has, compared to something like Mannequins and Warriors, is that it doesn't give you any defense. So it's a pretty squishy item. So that's something you have to keep in mind. And also, it doesn't give you any of that flat damage reduction. So you're not going to be able to tank those minions like some other starts would. But so yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. I would only go Bluestone really right now on Tier as well. Tier, Sun Wukong, and I would consider it on Arthur and on Cuckoo. But for Cuckoo and Arthur, Mannequins for Cuckoo, and then Warrior's Axe probably for Arthur a lot of the time. So yeah, Death Toll just really not about that much. But moving on, we're going to talk about the Guardians now. And keep in mind, for all of those starts, you're just going to be going Health Chalice in either 3 multi-pots or 4 multi-pots, or Health Chalice in 3 health pots or 4 health pots for the most part. There is something you can do since Warrior's Axe is so cheap. You can actually go Tier 1 boots, or if I can do it, you can go Tier 1 boots and then go Health Chalice and 2 health pots here. That's something you can do if you want that extra movement speed. And something really scummy that you could do if you really just don't want to ever die and are really afraid of playing solo and you're up against a really big lane bully and you just don't know what to do. You could actually go this, which is 1,200 gold here, and then you still have enough for Chalice. I can't believe this was even allowed. This gives you so much physical protection in the early game. Makes it absolutely impossible for you to get out traded. The other item that we have to consider, or items, I should say, is for the Guardians. So for the Guardians, they're in a bit of a different spot. I think their really only 2 viable options are Warrior's Axe and Vampiric Shroud. Now again, people keep asking me about Tainted Steel and whether I think that's going to be a good enough item. Or the other one, of course, what's the other one called? Oh, it's like Seagull, Warded Seagull. Warding Seagull, here we go. These are both, I think, going to be much more niche, so you don't really have to worry about them all too much. If you want to try out the Warding Seagull when you're against a magical, be my guest. It does make you pretty tanky. I just don't see it being worth it, either of these items ever being worth it, over something like Warrior's Axe for your Guardians, just because this is going to make you so tanky, absolutely impossible to gank. And again, that upgraded version of Warrior's Axe is called Sundering, right? I don't think you can actually look it up, but I already talked about it. The upgraded version just makes you so annoying in the late game, makes you so tanky, it allows you to do a lot of crazy damage basically because your starter item has a Soul Reaver on it, that this is going to be the go-to, I think, for most of your Guardians builds. I don't think you can really ever go mannequins on most of the Guardians. The only exception would be something like Ymir and maybe Cthulhu. They can actually mess around a little bit with this Mannequin Scepter and do some good work with it. But for most of the viable Guardians, I'm going to be going Warrior's Axe plus Chalice and a few health pots. Vampiric Shroud is another option if you're trying to play a Guardian that has no sustain and you're playing a Warrior that has sustain. This is going to give you physical protection and sustain to, kind of match their sustain in lane and also keep up with their bullying and all that. So that is an option, but Warrior's Axe also gives you a little bit of sustain and it's just a little bit a little bit better in the late game because it has better options for you to upgrade into. So that's something to keep in mind. Tainted Steel, basically the anti-heal starter item. People keep asking me about this, but I really, really do believe that anti-heal starter item doesn't really make sense. It's not really worth it. Anti-heal is not that valuable in the very, very early game, okay? Anti-heal is very valuable in the mid to late game in team fights when people are grouped up and there's a lot of healing and sustain going on. But at the beginning of the game, it's not really that worth it, and I would say probably overvalued a lot of the time, right? So I just personally do not see this starter item really ever being that good because in my opinion, it's better to buff your own kit than reduce the efficiency of somebody else's kit in the early game. There's obviously some exceptions, but that's just a general rule of thumb in my opinion. So I think Tainted Steel really not that viable. Warding Siegel is a little bit more viable, but it's just a bit more niche. And the upgraded versions of it can be pretty sick, but when in doubt, Warrior's Axe basically. If you really need the sustain, Vampiric Shroud can come in clutch for that. But as far as these Guardians go, that's going to be the few options. And yeah, as a breakdown, I just think at the current state of the items that Warrior's Axe and Mannequins are just a little bit overtuned for the physicals and maybe even the Guardians. So they're going to be the two starter items that shine the most. Now, the only other thing that I want to talk about is that Animosity. Okay, Animosity is what we're going to talk about real quick. Erling is not a Guardian. I've been doing it on Erling. Now, this is a start that you can mess around with, but this is going to be for you more experienced players that want to try something out that's fun or perhaps maybe get away with something a little bit more greedy. This is going to be a Boots Rush start where you go Health Chalice, Tier 2 Boots, go 2 multi-pots, and, of course, something like Blink or whatever for your starting Relic. That kind of goes without saying. And then what you're going to do is you're going to skip your starter item completely. Now, the reason for this is because Animosity is a thing. You have to go Benevolence. Animosity. So here it is. This is the upgraded version of Benevolence. Now, Benevolence is a really bad solo lane starter item. It's supposed to be like this, support starter item that's supposed to be like kind of greedy, but it's gonna like make you lose a little bit of farm in the beginning. It's just not good for starters in solo. It doesn't give you anything you want. It doesn't give you power. It doesn't give you any protections or anything like that. So because of that, you want to skip it entirely. But a possibility that you do have, or a decision that you have to make, is if you want to go Animosity later in the game. What this item does is insane. You guys have seen it on my YouTube. You guys have seen clips of it and everything like that. It gives you 4% damage on your auto attacks. It counts as magical damage, but it's a 4% of your maximum health. Not the enemy that you're hitting, but the health that you have added onto the damage. It's like a kin size for tanks because it takes the kin size or the health of the tank, which is like 3,000, takes 4% of that and adds that to every single auto. It's absolutely insane for a tank. It gives you so much damage in the late game. When you don't have any damage in your build. It's crazy. It's an insane bruiser item, gives you 400 health, 20 HP 5, 20 MP 5, which is really, really nice stats for just like a, kind of a decent, like tank damage item. But again, since the starter item is so bad, you have to skip it entirely. So this is something that you're going to have to, try out for yourself, and it's a bit more risky, so it's going to have to be for you experienced solo players. Something that I would maybe do for a build like this, I would go into Ninja Tabi. If I was against a physical, I'd go something like Berserkers, Frostbound, or maybe Stone Cutting there into a Talisman of Energy, into like a Void Shield, into Animosity. Although a lot of the time you can actually get your Animosity there. And then I can't actually build it because you can only build it into that. But this would be Animosity. In this late game, you're going to do so much damage with this build and actually be pretty tanky as well. So that would be like a build, but all the builds for all the warriors and stuff we're going to be talking about in a later video. But yeah, it's something that you can consider just because Animosity is so strong. And again, you don't want to be starting the starter item for it. So this would be the last option. But again, for the most part, as a general rule of thumb, Warrior's Axe, Mannequins are your go-tos. Bluestone on certain characters, Death Toll pretty much never. And then as far as Guardians go, you're pretty much always going to go Warrior's Axe or possibly a Vampiric Shroud. And then, of course, Tainted Steel and the Warding Siegel are pretty niche, but I just don't see them really being that worth it over the other starters. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. That's how to start as far as your starter items, and that's also where to start on the map. I wanted the video to be pretty short, but I try to give you guys as much information I can about the starter items so you know what to build and why we're building it and what's really going down with the meta so far. Expect lots of informative videos over the coming days with builds, with tier lists and what to be playing, how to climb ranked and all that. I'm going to get all of that out for you. I just need to play more and figure everything out. I don't want to give you guys information if it's not at least objective or whatever objective means in MOBA. So yeah, like I said, watch the gameplays. You're going to learn a lot from that and what I'm building and how I'm playing the map and everything. You're going to learn from watching those gameplays, so be on the lookout for those. And yeah, until that, I'll see you guys. Until next time, stay safe and healthy as always. Peace out, guys. Bye.